Meet Josh and Rick, two friends who had spent years bonding over a mutual love for weekend barbecues, football, and discussing how the world should really be run. They used to laugh about everything. That is, until politics entered the picture. Once they found themselves on opposite sides of the political spectrum, things quickly turned serious. Too serious. Josh was a staunch supporter of Party A. To him, the politicians from Party A were practically saints in suits. They were the selfless guardians of democracy, the champions of the common man, and Josh firmly believed that the world would be better if Party A ran everything. Rick, on the other hand, was just as passionate about Party B. He admired Party B's politicians, who, in his view, were pragmatic, tough, and always had the country's best interest at heart. For Rick, Party A was all talk, and Party B was action, real action that got things done. The problem was, Josh and Rick had begun to argue more than they laughed. Their debates became daily sparring matches, growing more heated with each passing news cycle. When they weren't texting each other angry political memes, they were glued to their favorite media outlets, convinced they were absorbing the unfiltered, righteous truth. It got so bad that their once beloved weekend BBQs had turned into shouting matches, where the grill's sizzling was often drowned out by their bickering over tax policies or healthcare reform. Their friends started avoiding them, sensing that any casual conversation could devolve into an impromptu debate about the merits of free markets versus government regulation. One particularly heated day, after Rick accused Josh of blindly following the party line, and Josh retorted that Rick couldn't see past his own propaganda, they decided to settle things once and for all. They needed a mediator. Someone wise. Someone neutral. Someone who could declare, unequivocally, which of them was right. Naturally, they turned to the monk. The monk welcomed them into his serene garden, a peaceful place far removed from the noise of 24-hour news channels. Rick and Josh immediately launched into their arguments, each hoping the monk would finally set the record straight on who was backing the right team. "Monk," Josh began, "it's clear that Party A is the only party with a real plan for the future. Look at their policies on healthcare. And don't even get me started on Party B's track record." Rick cut in. "Party B is practical, monk. They actually do things. Unlike Party A, which is just all promises with no action." The monk listened patiently as both men passionately laid out their cases, each convinced that they were arguing for the salvation of the country. After they had exhausted themselves, the monk quietly sipped his tea and smiled. "So," the monk said, "you both believe that the politicians in your parties are working for the greater good, yes?" "Absolutely," Josh replied. "No question," Rick agreed. The monk nodded thoughtfully. "Tell me, have either of you ever considered that politicians, despite their titles, are simply people with jobs that require them to convince you that they're indispensable?" Rick and Josh looked at each other, confused. "What do you mean?" Rick asked. "Well," the monk said, "you see, politicians are a bit like the actors in your favorite movies. They put on performances, say the right lines, and get you emotionally invested. But, unlike actors, they're not here to entertain, they're here to make you believe that they're your heroes, fighting for your cause. Josh frowned. But they are fighting for us, right? The monk chuckled. Are they? Or are they simply playing a game of good cop, bad cop, keeping you distracted with endless debates while they continue to benefit, regardless of whether anything really changes? Rick looked skeptical. So, are you saying all politicians are bad? The monk shook his head. Not necessarily. It's not about good or bad. It's about understanding that politicians are politicians. Their job is to keep you engaged, often by stirring emotions and fostering divisions. The more you argue over which one is the good guy or the bad guy, the more you forget that they all work within the same system. They win even when they don't do their job, because the focus stays on the drama, not the results. Josh scratched his head. But if then what's the point of supporting a party at all? The point, the monk said, smiling, is to remember that politicians are not your kings, nor are they heroes in some epic saga. They are public servants. Their role is to address the basic needs of the people, not to keep you fighting like fans of rival sports teams. If you spend all your time arguing over which party is better, you might lose sight of what really matters, how those politicians are serving you. Rick leaned back, thinking. So, what are we supposed to do? Just stop caring? Not at all, the monk replied. Care about your country, care about your community. Advocate for what you believe in. But don't let political parties turn you against each other. Politicians thrive on distraction. The more divided you are, the more they can get away with not doing their job. Josh laughed, albeit reluctantly. So, you're saying we're like pawns in their game? The monk grinned. Something like that. The good news is, you can choose to stop playing the game. You don't have to fight over politicians who may not even know your name. Instead, work together to hold them accountable. After all, their job is to work for you, not the other way around. Rick nodded slowly. So, instead of arguing over which party is right, we should be focusing on whether they're doing their jobs. Exactly, the monk said, pleased. And if they're not, it doesn't matter which party they belong to. Hold them accountable, and don't let them off the hook just because they wear the right color tie. Josh and Rick sat in silence, realizing that their arguments had been, in a way, a distraction from the real issue. They weren't enemies. They were two people who wanted the best for their country, just from different perspectives. As they stood to leave, the monk gave them one final piece of advice. And remember, next time you feel like arguing, ask yourselves, are you really debating the issues, or just caught up in the show? They chuckled, feeling lighter than they had in months. For the first time in ages, they didn't feel the need to argue. Instead, they walked away with a new perspective, and maybe even the beginning of a political truce. In the end, the monk hadn't chosen sides. He had simply reminded them that in the game of politics, the people should always come first, and that sometimes, the only way to win is to stop playing altogether.
This story comes from the book, The Serene Monk, Tales of Wisdom, Worry, and Wry Smiles, by the Primate Philosopher, Nick. Dive into this captivating collection where a wise monk guides people through life's challenges with a unique blend of deep wisdom, humor, and sharp insights into human behavior. Each tale offers not only solutions, but also a touch of levity and reflection, making the journey both enlightening and entertaining. For more inspiring stories, you can find the full book on Amazon. The link is in the description. Happy reading!